The Naive Theater of the Air presents Rewired by Matthew Broyles. Episode 23, Communion.
Harry had never been particularly afraid of the dark. Not in Brooklyn, anyway, where he knew the streets, their nooks and crannies. But this was not Brooklyn, a compact city-state teeming with motives, needs, and predictable behaviors. This was a non-place, a gaping void into which this building and its undead occupant had been deliberately placed, for one end and one only. Thus, when at last it was revealed to the outside world, there was nowhere else to hide. Even in the close confines of the lab, huddling amidst flashlights and the scuffle of military boots, Harry felt exposed. The sky watched him, unflinchingly and without need for concealment. He and the tense body of Nina, which held as fast to him as he did to her, were incontrovertibly doomed. Through occasional glints of lamplight through the window, he saw the face of the one who had brought this upon them all. Dr. Lilly argued with Colonel Haley, each of them gesticulating towards his father, who remained tied to the examination chair. No one was allowed inside the main room with Lars Selden. Harry's father was left adrift in his own private hell, and his son was powerless to save him. Any move he made in his father's direction would conjure another glimpse of the phantom, not just in his dad's eyes, but in those of the world. Haley's troops cut all outside communication lines, but no one was certain what specific means had been employed to broadcast the images that now reverberated across the net. Harry knew that eventually, someone was going to have to take a look at his father's brain. Surrounded by the steely instruments of Republic order, Harry feared that this examination would not be conducted with any degree of consideration for the subject's comfort or safety. From his chest, Nina twisted her face up to meet his. Any other person's eyes might be mere suggestions, holes of dark in the dimness. But to him, hers glowed with a luminous intensity.
You have to help him.
The words were felt through his chest more than spoken from her lips. Dr. Dalal was not far away, and although his concentration was fixed singly on the task of isolating the lab's electronics from the outside world, Nina knew there was a chance he could hear her. Harry's head felt heavy.
If I go in there, they'll shoot me.
No, they won't. I'll be with you. They need me.
Harry's throat managed a dry swallow. His eyes strayed towards the distracted figure of Dr. Dalal, poring over wiring schematics. The man wouldn't notice their departure, if they were quiet, which Harry generally was not. Nina, however, managed to lift herself from Harry's embrace and rise to her feet in one fluid motion, disturbing not a speck of dust. Her silhouette against Dalal's lamp reached out to him. Harry's palms began to sweat as he took hold of her hand, and with his utmost effort, he did not utter a sound as he rose towards her. Gently, she directed him towards the empty space at the back of the room. He hoped that he was correct in his recollection that the door was open. It was. Stepping through into the near-total blackness of the examination room, Harry felt Nina stop in her tracks. Her hand gripped his fiercely. He looked in her direction, but could see nothing except the occasional dark outline, illuminated briefly by flashlights passing on the opposite side of the window. He tried to nudge her arm, but it was frozen in place. For a moment he thought she was having an episode, but this seemed like the opposite. Nina did not collapse weakly onto the floor. On the contrary, her sudden burst of forward motion nearly broke his arm. It was a purposeful stride, silent and resolute. In the shroud of shadow, Harry couldn't imagine how she knew where she was going. Until he heard his father's voice, mere feet away.
Harry, what have they done to me?
Nothing, Dad. All the power's off.
Why is it so bright in here?
Involuntarily, Harry glanced around. He knew what his dad's usual visions were like. This was different. There was no hatred, not even the merest trace of bitterness in his voice as he bore witness to whatever it was that his eyes were telling him. Nina's fingers began to twitch in Harry's grip. Not nervously, but with persistent strokes. He remembered an old movie, and glanced vainly around for a writing instrument and some paper.
Use this.
Harry nearly jumped out of his skin. He had not heard her approach. Quickly, he got hold of himself and reached out in her general direction. He felt her place 2 objects in his hand, clearly a pen and a small notepad. As gently as possible, he moved them into proximity to his other hand, the one which contained Nina's. Brushing the objects against the tops of her fingers, he felt her suddenly seize the hand containing the writing implements and relieve him of them swiftly. In Vinson's palm, the glow of a flashlight began slowly to crack the gloom's hold on the tableau before them. Nina stood at Harry's left, stock still but for the madly efficient motion of her hands. In front of her, his father's face had gone even more oddly serene. But for the rise and fall of his chest, Harry might well have believed the old man was dead. Turning away from the sight, he was shocked to find Nina's eyes piercing his. Or at least, they should have been her eyes. He did not recall ever seeing them so intense. After a quick moment, she turned her gaze past him towards Vinson. The doctor stepped gingerly around Harry and took up position on Nina's left side. Harry watched Nina's stare turn back smoothly in the direction of his ensorcelled father. In the glow of Vinson's flashlight, Harry craned his neck to see what had appeared on the notepad. He did not know what Nina's handwriting looked like, but he could not imagine that it normally resembled the eldritch script now issuing from her pen. The letters arched and warped in strange places, so much so that he was not entirely certain at first that the strokes were creating actual words. But the more he stared at them, they began to congeal into cohesive form. Having thus brought them into focus, he dared not look away. The list was long, so he concentrated the center of his vision on the most recent entries.
Erebus 2, Acheron, Ephron, Saldana, Seren, Tantalus.
Harry's mind felt a tug of familiarity, faint but certain. His eyes hovered around the 4th word, Saldana. His knees nearly buckled when the recognition hit home. He signaled frantically to Vinson, who reluctantly looked up from the unfolding text.
Saldana. It's one of the satellites HPL relayed through. It was on Shu's broadcast. The one that got discovered.
What the fuck is going on here?
With all his might, Harry held his ground. Turning slightly, he gestured towards Nina's hands, which up until now had been shielded from their eyes by his bulk. Both of the men's eyes went wide.
Communion. Come see for yourself, Dr. Lilly.
Lilly approached warily, as if there were an electrified field between him and Nina. Taking up position alongside Vinson, his eyes squinted at the notepad for a few moments, evidently having as much trouble deciphering the text as Harry had. But when at last the words became clear, he visibly stepped back.
HPL satellites. Someone's implanted that information in her subconscious.
What's happening to Dad is not normal.
We already know Barrett's been tinkering with your father. We could be on the air now.
Unlikely. The power required to transmit into space would give off a significant energy reading. His brain may be set up to utilize electrode connection, hack local networks, and find a transmitter to deliver stored images from his visual cortex. But he cannot be the direct link between this location and the satellite.
And he is unusually peaceable.
Behind the colonel, Harry spotted the tense silhouette of Lieutenant Graham, her weapon aimed squarely at his father. Breaking into a sweat, Harry stepped into the path of the barrel. Haley watched him and reluctantly signaled for Graham to lower her gun. She did so, but Harry remained where he was, even as he turned back to face the doctors. Lilly was staring at Nina's notepad.
What's this?
Smithwick, Aronson, Calderon, Zoo, Cataribi.
These aren't satellite names.
Surnames.
Of who?
Whoever Barrett wants us to focus our attention on, while he carries out his little fishing expedition.
We're well past fishing here. This is a targeted attack.
Wait, that's a sentence there.
Apologies for nature of communication.
Harry's blood ran cold. He couldn't decide which would be worse. That Barrett had programmed Nina with this shadow play, or that she might actually be speaking on behalf of an invisible alien race. She looked untroubled, but intent. Her hands continued writing.
By your viewpoint aspect line of sight, more unexist than exist.
This is preposterous. There's no record of any written communication from the hands of seers.
Nina is no seer. You have not dealt with a super source before. Few have.
Did she do this in your lab?
No. As I said, my intention was to avoid bringing her into contact with a seer this powerful under James's watch.
But you have no evidence that Barrett didn't try this already.
If he had, I would have known. The VEF have many eyes at BDF headquarters.
And James Barrett doesn't? He owns the whole damn Republic now.
But he didn't under Horowitz. That old man had more reach in more places than either of us combined. And he did not trust Dr. Barrett one iota.
How the hell would Horowitz be able to tell if Barrett was secretly loading these two up with a transmission from the Disciples?
He wouldn't, but I would. James did not like to get his hands dirty. I have been the instrument of all of his medical machinations for more years than I care to count. I know him far better even than you, Dr. Lilly.
Fat fucking chance.
Sightline shifts possibilities reduce. Prevent further diminution. Request respond.
By this time, Haley had joined the group surrounding Nina, whose pin now froze in midair, millimeters from its last mark.
Dr. Lilly, does it hurt us to go along with this?
How can we know? Maybe our response activates some sort of trigger.
He's strapped down, not plugged in.
He's not the one riding.
The girl? I think we can take her.
Remember our earlier conversation, Doctor. Let's err on the side of evidence, not assumptions.
Yes, evidence. Communion might not have been the best choice for your opening argument on that front.
Point taken. So let's follow the progression of events. Selden's dampener is removed, predictably activating his Vorn sensations. This coincided with loss of consciousness in Miss Golding.
Correlation noted. Additionally, the power and the network were still on.
Noted.
Upon termination of power, Golding emerged from trance state. Observation of Selden after electrical system disengagement suggests his Vorn sensations persisted.
Noted.
Golding remained in a normal state of consciousness until...
Lilly turned to look at Harry, who blinked for a moment as he realized it was his turn to speak.
Nina, Golding was perfectly normal, so far as I could tell. Not having known her all that long, until she entered this room. Oh, and Dr. Vinson handed her a pen and a paper.
So, if I understand correctly, there were 3 unauthorized entries into this room, more or less simultaneously?
I only came in after I saw what was happening.
In the pitch black.
I suspected something like this might happen. I was watching for it. And if I may say so, Colonel, while I appreciate your concern about data leaks, the phenomenon we are witnessing right now is precisely what we are here to analyze. Let us stay focused on that.
Yeah.
Request respond. Request respond. Request respond.
Lilly inspected the handwriting before him, and his shoulders sagged in defeat. Suddenly, he wheeled around.
No one says anything to the subject except me. Not a word, not a gesture. Upon termination of communication, all present will withdraw silently to the kitchen and shall not speak until the examination room has been sealed. Is that completely understood?
Everyone nodded stiffly. The quiet of the room was palpable. Not a single electric whir or shifting of air, save for the shallow breaths of the tiny audience. Harry noticed an odd transformation in the doctor's demeanor. The shambling, troubled genius he had met previously was now standing fully erect, eyes alert as he strode confidently into place between Nina and Lars, facing the former.
Who am I addressing?
Nina's hands scribbled swiftly, then stopped. Lilly peered forward to read the pad.
The dream.
If Lilly was taken aback, he didn't show it, Harry thought.
Do you understand our interpretation of that word?
We understand that you cannot understand. Approximate designation chosen.
You used the word we. How many are you?
By your viewpoint, line of sight, more unexist now than exist.
By my viewpoint line of sight, how many exist?
Uncertain by our viewpoint line of sight.
Why have you decided to speak with us?
A window closes and opens. Manifold paths issue. One desirable, to us is possible.
Lilly pondered this. Multiple universe theories seemed to be implied here, as did the contraction of time, assuming these beings existed on a different dimensional axis. He could see Vinson bursting with the effort of silence and stared her down. Once initial data had been gathered, they would discuss all implications between them before re-engaging whatever this was.
How long do we have before the window closes?
Uncertain. Understand that we cannot understand your question. A window is near. We see and unsee it. It is not desirable to us.
Have you spoken to any others of our kind?
Uncertain. By your viewpoint line of sight, we speak to you.
Have you spoken to James Barrett?
Manifold paths issue. Uncertain.
What is the nature of your relationship to our kind?
The dream.
By our viewpoint line of sight, you take something from us. Do you also give something back?
We exist and unexist harmoniously with you.
There are more of us now than there once were, and yet you say that by our viewpoint line of sight, more of you unexist than exist now.
It is not desirable to us.
Clearly, then, we can exist without you.
You exist and unexist, always as we do. You do not see.
I understand that we occupy a different axis in space-time. But are you saying that if you unexist, we will also unexist?
You exist and unexist along manifold paths.
But if this window closes, you do not.
Uncertain. Manifold paths issue. The window is near.
What has caused more of you to unexist than once existed by our viewpoint line of sight?
You began to taste bad.
Recently?
A window closed. Another opened. It is here that we exist and unexist.
The doctor nodded in faint understanding. He glanced at Vinson, who was scribbling notes furiously, but looked up to meet his eye upon noticing his pause. Jerking his head towards the kitchen, he addressed Nina.
We must discuss these matters privately. I will return soon, hopefully before the window closes this time.
It is desirable to us.
He nodded, pausing for a moment to take in Nina's sharp glare. That was the unnerving bit, he thought. He didn't know the woman well, but whatever had taken hold of her consciousness appeared to be more powerful and confident than she. If it was Barrett's work, he had been thorough. Stepping out of Nina's sight, Lilly motioned for the rest of the group to follow him. They did so hurriedly. Graham backed in last, her eyes still locked on the silhouette of the strange duo, fixed motionless in the center of the examination room. As she passed, Lilly leaned over and quickly sealed the door. Harry's gaze attempted to penetrate the blackness behind the windows, where two people he cared about were being held hostage. By what, he could not fathom. The confidence Dr. Lilly had exuded during the experiment was failing him now. He sat down at the small table, shaking his head.
I did this.
Not you alone.
They wouldn't have done it if I hadn't have told them to.
Dr. Lilly, your team wanted to be a part of your accomplishment.
You can't possibly understand. I live every day carrying the weight of every single person who has died as a result of my accomplishment. That burden alone is hard enough to bear, as I'm sure Colonel Haley can testify.
The colonel said nothing, but took a seat. He knew the doctor wasn't finished.
But now I find that not only are the unfinished lives of the dead upon my back, but also the damned souls of those who find themselves afflicted with this, whatever this is.
Is it so horrible a fate being able to see whatever this is? Can it be worse than living as a slave to the wire?
That brought him up short. He had made precisely the same argument in response to Ahania's petition the night before. One didn't always get to make choices between good and bad, he reminded himself. Sometimes bad and worse were the only options. Bad and worse. The thought struck him between the eyes.
I need to talk to Ahania.
Harry, Vinson, Dalal, and Graham shared confused glances.
No.
We know that Barrett is not on our side. He's hijacked Brooklyn and sent the diaspora into a frenzy, endangering the safety of our republic. He has set us up.
Dr. Barrett was not spotted consorting with VEF fugitives in wired territory. What did she say to you, by the way?
Who?
Dr. Neidhart. You bought her a beer.
Like a flash, the recognition burst into Harry's mind. He knew she looked familiar. But what the hell was she doing talking to him? He struggled to recall the conversation.
She said she was a leaf on the wind.
Haley sat back, dumbfounded. Lilly stared at Harry in stupefaction. Vinson, unaware of the incident at all, was speechless.
That was it?
No, there was more. I can't remember the whole thing. Small talk, flirty stuff.
That I can believe.
It was all to give me that business card from the car rental place.
Exactly. She's the one who sent Selden here.
I sent Selden here. Whatever the hell Dr. Neidhart was playing at had nothing to do with me or the VEF. I can assure you of that.
Gabriella, she did that so I would see her.
She called for your head on the net, and Dalal's, and everyone else in your circle. She is not an ally, and I guarantee she's the one who sent Shadler for the two of you.
But this was a VEF operation. What interest would Washington have in delivering those two here?
I know what they want.
All eyes turned to him. He did not meet them. His mind struggled to escape its body. Trapped here in a room he could not leave, not now. The unwilling key to a lock he dared not open, the existence of which could not be known by anyone. He willed the cup to pass from him, but it could not. His silence permeated the room, a vine through the thicket in which they were all entangled.
What do they want, Doctor?
Something they can never have. Something that no one can possibly be trusted with.
Except you. It's a back door, isn't it?
Harry froze. His mind lit up with a vision. The receding form of Kali Savine. A promise he had made. One that now, in all the confusion, seemed murky and perhaps ill-advised. He said nothing.
No.
And when you finally die, for real this time, taking the secret with you, the world will be safe from... what, exactly?
From you, and Barrett, and Neidhart, and everyone else, especially me.
Doctor, are you telling me that you have some kind of access point into rewired minds that no one else knows about?
No, Colonel, I'm not telling you that. Dr. Vinson can infer what she likes, but the nature of the information that she, Barrett, and Neidhart are seeking is something I'm sworn to never reveal.
Sworn by who?
By my responsibility as a steward of human rights, and by everything I hold dear on this earth. I've only ever sought to advance the well-being of humanity. I will not be a party to its ruin.
Good. Then why don't you figure out what precisely is going on in that room, so we have some answers for the VEF and the disciples, and every rewired citizen on the net who are holding their breaths, waiting for you to speak up and give them a reason not to tear the diaspora into shreds.
Lilly plowed his forehead into his hands on the table. He knew Haley was right. The Vorn question came first. Earlier, before the examination, reports of VEF and disciple caravans approaching Aeolian were pouring into Haley's people outside. It was not altogether clear whether the army could keep them at bay without bloodshed. And that was just in Texas. The thought of what might be happening elsewhere.
We have to use the ODA. Is the lab sufficiently cut off from the outside?
We have generators in place, waiting for your go-ahead. All outside wires of any kind have been severed.
What about wireless?
My comm units are jamming the airwaves. Nothing's getting in or out.
A void of information, Lilly thought. A vacuum, pulling into it further waves of death and chaos. Good blood after bad. His fear had caused this. Wallowing in the mistakes of the past, he had allowed the future to sneak up on him. Fear and doubt were no longer options.
I need a satellite tide beam.
Haley stared at him.
Just one. Combine the streams externally. Audio only. The cruder is better to prevent data piggyback.
You know I can't do that.
At last, Lilly's eyes met the Colonel's. Haley saw them pulsing with something hard. The undercurrent of fear that had always been there since they first met decades ago was gone. Haley found it extremely unnerving.
I didn't invent rewiring, Colonel. My team did. And if I'm going to find the root of this division that threatens to destroy our society, I need my team.
I can get you Diaz. Then you have Dr. Dalal here. At present, nobody can find Shu.
Diaz and Shu were late additions. They only refine the process. And Dr. Dalal, apologies, Arshad, but you only know what I know.
No.
Dr. Stone is dead. Without him, there are only 2 members of the team left.
You were asking me to provide an audio feed from this laboratory to both the potentially compromised Republic of Brooklyn and to the offices of Washington's top scientists. I will not do it.
Then we have nothing more to discuss.
I have severely misjudged you, Doctor. For all your talk about the good of humanity, you are willing to sit here like a spoiled child while the entire diaspora crumbles into ashes. You're willing to let us all die if you can't get your way. That's been your legacy from day one. The rest of us were too damn stupid to figure it out until now.
The words stung Lilly's heart. He did not want them to be true. He had done brave things, risked his own life for the good of others. But then came the familiar voice. The one who caused all this. The one who now told him that the words Levi Haley spoke were true. He hated that voice, almost as much as he hated himself for believing it. Lilly pushed the voices, all of them, down deep within, leaving their confrontation for another time. A time which would likely never come. He'd had 3 decades for doubt. As of this moment, it was hereby banished. He gathered himself as he stood to face the aged colonel.
And you have no choices left. You can turn this investigation over to Dr. Dalal and Dr. Vinson, but you know there will be no resolution along that path. Only my team and I can provide the answer to the Vorn mystery.
James was right about you.
And about you. He knew you would spring Selden. That's why he loaded him up with a transmitter. But Dr. Vinson didn't know she was supposed to bring Miss Golding as well, did she?
Nina, she was in my cell when I got evacuated. I didn't expect to see her again.
And how exactly did that situation get rectified? Be honest.
James told me to leave for Texas with Golding as a bargaining chip for the Selden boy.
Fucking bitch.
Shut the fuck up, Selden. Okay, Doctor, you've proved your point. We all know that you're fully capable of pulling the asshole card, and that you do not give a shit about anyone else. Given the track records of your former teammates, I honestly should have seen that coming. Be that on my own head. You'll get your fucking tight beam, since thanks to your team, the damn Wireds know where we are anyway. But just so you know, Doctor, the next time I hear you launch into any bullshit speech about the good of humanity, I will punch you right in the goddamn teeth. That is a promise. Consider it a posthumous gift from Major Levine.
Lilly nodded, slowly, acknowledging the colonel's looming silhouette as it departed. The doctor's heart fluttered in his chest, and he shoved the oncoming panic attack roughly into the abyss. He had pushed all of his pieces onto the board now. All of them, save one. The door slammed, and silence gripped the room like an invisible fist. Dalal was shaken, fumbling with his hands. Harry's insides twisted, unsure of anything. Graham's eyes burned holes in the opposite wall as she stood guard. It was Dr. Vinson who stepped forward at last. Lilly eyed her. She was much too calm for his taste, and he fought the instinct to back closer to Graham for protection. But he had cast the die now. All consequences were rightfully his.
If I had known that a journey of 1,700 miles facing capture, imprisonment, torture, and execution at every step would end with my precious cargo back in the hands of those who would see us in chains, I would have simply shot the poor saps and had done with it.
My dad and Nina are not your fucking cargo, you arrogant shithead.
I wouldn't have wasted a bullet on you.
Harry felt it, in his pocket. The gift from Kali. It wouldn't take much effort. Slap that lethal patch onto Vinson's neck, and Graham would be unlikely to detect what had happened until it was too late. But then it would be too late, and he would be out of the game. His promise broken. He had to see this through, for both of his charges. He turned to face Lilly, who was still staring down Vinson.
I'm going to separate them until you get the electricity back on.
Both doctors turned and regarded him with astonishment.
You know nothing. We have never witnessed an event like this. We have no idea what will happen if we separate them.
Do it.
What? Are you insane?
We need a clean run on this. We need to see the phenomenon from start to finish. Arshad checked their vitals, and if anything is out of the normal range, we'll hold off.
This is not happening in their bloodstreams. This is transplanar exchange.
Which is interesting, don't you think? How does a three-dimensional wall block activity occurring outside of those 3 dimensions?
You're suggesting that this is evidence of a psychologically based hallucination.
I'm suggesting that we find out.
Harry needed no further prompting. He flipped the latch quickly and stepped through into the dark void that held his father and Nina. A slowly wavering pinpoint of light indicated Dr. Dalal's position as he took pulses and measured heartbeats. Apart from the rustle of his clothing, the room's occupants made not a sound. Approaching the stock-still form of Nina, he wondered what effect the unnaturally stiff posture was having on her body. Oddly, he was less worried about his father. The old man slumped in his seat, a glazed expression embossed upon the silhouette of his face. His eyes looked a little like Nina's did during one of her normal episodes. He was relaxed, if only physically. Hurriedly, Dalal tiptoed over to Harry, who now stood only a few feet away from Nina.
All vitals are normal. Whatever's going on, it's not affecting their basic life functions.
Harry doubted that somehow. But he was no expert, although now that he thought of it, neither was anyone else.
Do you think I can touch her? Just enough to try and lead her into that storage room we were in earlier, before.
You can try. Take the hand with the pen first.
Harry hadn't thought of that. There was the possibility that she could stab him, if she was far enough out of it, which clearly she was. He would have to make a quick, smooth motion to rid her hand of the pointed object and gain enough physical leverage to start moving her away. He swallowed hard and stepped forward. As he came up beside her, he swore he felt a gust of air as her head turned to stare at him. Even in the gloom, it was an unsettling glare. Whatever he was going to do, he needed to do it now before he lost his nerve. Reaching with one hand for her shoulder, his other arm scooped downwards and found the hand which held the pen. He closed it with a firm grip. To his infinite relief, she gave no resistance, sliding his other hand down from her shoulder to her hands. He swiftly removed the pen, swinging his arm around to his back pocket. Their hands now interlocked. Harry spoke.
Dr. Lilly wants to turn the power back on and continue this conversation. So I need you to follow me into the other room while I check the systems first.
There was no acknowledgement. The alien stare from Nina's eyes did not change. Harry sweated, but did not waver. He began to walk backwards, gently pulling her along with him. Inch by inch, they crossed the seemingly vast expanse between the dim form of his father and the door through which he desperately hoped this creature would turn back into Nina. Crossing the threshold at last, he saw that they had cleared the door. Dalal, close behind, reached in deftly and closed it behind them with a soft click. Instantly, Nina's body collapsed into Harry. He caught her and carried her soft frame tenderly over to the bench on which they had sat not an hour ago. In the darkness, he could not tell whether her eyes were open. But she was breathing, and she was warm. And to what few senses he trusted, she felt like Nina again. Harry became aware of a low, dim hum somewhere above the ceiling tiles. The generators were coming online. He set his face in a preemptive squint, preparing for the shock of full illumination. Within seconds it came, absorbing the initial shock of light through his retinas. His eyes rushed to Nina's face, which was slack as she lay under the influence of an episode. At least he hoped that was the extent of it. He hardly knew her, but something inside him felt like it would crumble if she were hurt. There were so few people in the world he truly cared about, even back in Brooklyn. The last true thread of what he might consider love had snapped when his mother died from her stroke. Just as Harry was taking his first steps into adulthood, her death stopped that journey cold in its tracks. For without her, not only had he lost his only advocate, but the job of looking after his addled father fell to him, the last person in the world who the old man would listen to. Every attachment from that moment on felt tenuous. He watched movies about love and believed he understood them conceptually, but could not truly conceive of a situation in which two strangers would find their lives so incomplete without the other that they would commit themselves fully to a shared life. He did not know if he loved Nina, or how he would be able to tell if he did. They shared only a sense of humor, memories of their amorous explorations of the ward, and now their entanglement in this nightmare. But he did feel a tug of pain inside when he considered that her ordeal moments ago may have caused her suffering. He placed his cheek on her belly as it slowly rose and fell, and held her. He did not know for how long. A low moan from her abdomen tickled his eardrum, and he turned his head gently to look up towards her face. Her initial blanch of surprise was replaced with a wave of amusement upon seeing his face peeking up from her belly.
Harry, I know I said to keep going if I checked out, but damn.
Harry reddened despite himself, but hearing her voice was a cool salve against his burning nerves. Combined with the warmth of her embrace, the emotion was almost overwhelming.
I didn't know if you were coming back.
I didn't go anywhere. It was the same as all the other times, except this time I was standing up. I could see my hands writing all that crazy shit, but I couldn't feel them. I saw you trying to protect me. That was sweet.
Harry wanted to say something. A phrase. Something people said all the time. But he didn't know if it meant what he thought it meant. And he suspected neither did she. He could see that she was thinking the same thing, or at least something similar. If two people who did not know what love was decided to say they loved each other, what harm did it do? Ultimately, he decided to let whatever floated in the air between their eyes and bodies stay unspoken. It was there, and its name was not important. From the adjacent observation room came a faint ping of metal on metal, as Dr. Dalal busied himself in some arcane preparation ritual. Nina tensed, returning from their briefly shared fantasy world back into whatever world this was.
Harry, you have to help your dad.
If I go in there, it'll be like before. He'll be trying to get at the damn thing on my shoulder.
Maybe something's changed now. What if I'm projecting something that turns the effect down?
You collapsed the minute that door was closed. Whatever's going on, it's specifically between you two and requires physical proximity. And I'm certainly not taking you in there with me again until they have all their gear ready.
The amulet. Go see if it's still on the table in there.
Harry's knees had fallen asleep while he knelt at her side, and it took him a moment to stand properly. He peeked around the corner, past the bustling form of Dr. Dalal, and looked through the glass. The amulet was indeed still on the table. Casting his glance to the left, Harry's heart sank as he beheld his wide-eyed, paranoid father, still strapped to the chair, alone. There was a time when he believed that he possessed no feelings at all for his dad, and would have mocked his pain. But he had seen too much since then. He could not dole out judgment so easily as he once had. Nina's hand reached up and found Harry's cheek. As she pulled it away, he looked, and was surprised to find the tip of her finger moist. He was aghast. His childhood was defined by tears shed in reaction to the dictates of this bitter old man, whose vain attempts to harden his son created nothing but more self-hatred, beginning the cycle again. Except that one day, Harry did stop crying. He remembered it clearly. It was because of a dish. Helping his mother wash the dishes one perfectly average day at age 10, young Harry's hand slipped, sending the cheap glass plate careening into the metal front of the stove. As the dish burst into pieces, sending jagged waves of sound in all direction, the thud of his father's boots began to approach from the next room. Predictably, his mother rushed to clear the evidence, and predictably, she failed. Harry's dad stood in that doorway, a solid piece of sinew, an immense object that it seemed no force in young Harry's universe could possibly budge. The soldier's gaze dropped immediately past his wife, an occasional and incidental irritant, and landed directly on the rotund, stooped boy standing before the sink. Words flew from the sergeant's mouth like shrapnel, searching out any crevice into which they might find purchase. For his own good, Harry had been told so many times. Remembering it now, he could not be certain what it was that made him decide not to cry. He had cried so much already, him and his mother both. Perhaps there were no tears left. Amidst the verbal onslaught, young Harry simply stood, staring at his father as his mom scuttled into the next room, into the recesses of her denial. When at last his dad noticed that the reaction he had come to expect was not forthcoming, he stopped abruptly. Bending down, he got into his son's face and asked him a question. Remembering it now, Harry did not recall what the question was, but he remembered his answer with perfect clarity.
One day, you're going to be old and I'm going to kill you.
Harry had been grounded for some indeterminate stretch of eons following that incident, but some part of him felt better having said it. In the years that followed, his father brought it up from time to time during their confrontations, and when he did, Harry said it again, louder and more confidently, no matter the consequence. The words seemed to awaken some carefully hidden fear in his dad, and the larger Harry got, the less his father mentioned it in the course of their arguments. His mother's death brought the two men's lives and their communication into a holding pattern, a long one. Speech was functional only, imparting the status of one or another household or grocery item. They lived separate lives. Lars in his circle of bar refuse and paranoid street people, Harry in his fog of sex stim and half-assed net hacking. The years ground on, and in the absence of his mother to save, the impetus to follow through on his youthful threat had lost its urgency. Now Harry took in the weak, helpless old man before his eyes and willed himself to feel hate. He tried in vain to resurrect his 10-year-old self, so certain in its conviction that this monster, this child abuser, this wife-beating son of a bitch, deserved a merciless death. He stared at Nina's moist fingers and put his own hand up to his cheek. Why the fuck was he crying? What possible reason could he have, he wondered, for wishing anything but the worst possible suffering on this sorry excuse for a human being? Why hadn't he left him for dead back at the line and let some U.S. Army private earn his promotion? Nina saw the pain on Harry's face.
Harry, what's wrong?
All of this. I should not have been put in a position to preserve that man. For science, for the fucking Republic, for whatever the hell we're all doing out here. Why the fuck is it my job?
She leaned into him, as if her touch could absorb at least some of his anguish. She squeezed him tightly, drawing out what poison she could. Her eyes met his.
We don't always get to decide what our job is, but the more you try to push it away, the more you will blame yourself later if you don't step up to it now.
I can't help him. Why do I want to?
Because you're a better man than he is, and he knows it.
His mind thought back to their conversation in East St. Louis about Grandpa Selden. There was some impasse between Harry's father and grandfather, something that time did not give them the opportunity to dislodge, even if reconciliation might one day have been possible. Grandpa Selden's death during the secession had frozen their relationship in amber, two dogs at each other's throats, forever and ever. Who knew how much of that unresolved tension had propelled Harry's father's descent into darkness? Was it possible that the same path awaited Harry if he did nothing now? A gear clicked into place within Harry's mind. Placing his hand on Nina's shoulder, he gently pushed her back, away from him. With a lean of his head, he indicated the couch in the space adjacent to the observation room. Nodding, she stepped through and sat down. There was a door. He pulled it shut, turned, and opened the door into the main examination room. Across the room, Harry's father grunted like a caged animal, straining against his straps. Clearly, he saw the passenger his son either was or was not carrying. Harry turned his eyes away, making for the small tray in the center of the room. The back of the amulet lay open, the tiny piece from within still glinting separately beside it. With large, stubby fingers, he struggled to mash the component into place, releasing a sharp sigh of relief as it finally snapped home. Checking through the windows into the kitchen area, he saw Vinson and Lilly growling at one another at the table. Graham was not to be seen, at least not from his vantage point. He took the amulet in one hand and walked over to his father's chair. The old man's face broke into a grim rictus as he approached. Harry stopped.
Dad, close your eyes.
That bastard right there on you. He'll come for me.
The minute I put this on you, he can do whatever the fuck he likes, and you won't see or feel it.
That doesn't mean it's not happening.
Maybe not. But it does mean that I can talk to you before all of this begins.
What the fuck do we have to talk about?
Whether or not I'm going to kill you.
The old man's eyes grew wide. His focus no longer fought for purchase against Harry's shoulder, but looked him squarely in the eye. Harry stepped forward, swiftly placing the amulet around his father's neck. With unmistakable speed, the old man's muscles relaxed. His face, however, did not. They regarded each other for a silent moment. Harry's eyes had dried, but were still a bit puffy. His father's were a kaleidoscope of terror.
It wasn't supposed to be this way. I was supposed to be fighting the bastards, not letting them fucking eat me. Lilly is every bit of the son of a bitch that Bearer was. You have to get me out of here.
And start a civil war. No, Dad, I don't have to do that. And I won't.
So you're on their side now.
There is no they, Dad. Everybody in that room wants to string each other up. And it's about to get worse. They're bringing in Barrett and someone from Washington.
What?
Dad, we are fucked. Barrett hooked you up with some kind of transmitter so the whole world knows Lilly's alive. And thanks to the dust-ups with the VEF and the U.S. Army at the border, they know exactly where we are. Lilly says he can't make a public statement until he knows what the hell is going on, and apparently can't do that without bringing in Barrett and our Memphis friend Andrea, who it turns out is Dr. Gabriella Neihart.
The one from the Austin lab.
Yes, who now works for the United States government, and who made sure we got here.
Like Shadler.
And Barrett's all over the net saying that Lilly's made contact, ushering in a new era of peace and understanding with the Vorn. Shitloads of people are on their way here. VEF, disciples, anyone who wants answers. They want them from you.
They want them from the Queen.
What?
Your friend, the girl. I've never seen anything like what she's carrying.
Not a Vorn?
They were all around her. The regular ones. The Queen didn't even touch the ground. Her wings barely moved. So slow I couldn't track them. But the next time I noticed them, they were in a different position. She glowed, Harry. She has the power to control them all. Me, I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't move. I could only watch.
Harry's blood ran cold. Years of rebuttals circulated in his head as he searched for something to explain what his father, and at some level he himself, had witnessed. Something that confounded even the great Dr. Waylon Lilly. Thinking back, he remembered only one person who had not been surprised. He jerked his head up in the direction of the kitchen window and was startled to face a short, lean woman in Republic Army uniform, Lieutenant Graham. She stood not 10 feet away, a heavy-looking pistol in one hand, her rifle holstered on the opposite shoulder. The expression on her dusty face was calm, but deadly serious.
What are you doing here?
Keeping his eyes averted from the pistol, Harry considered his words carefully.
My dad, he can't take all of this. I'm trying to help.
I know what's in your pocket.
What the hell is she talking about?
I searched you while you were sleeping. So, are you going to use it?
Harry was at a complete loss. His jaw opened to speak, but he could not. Graham stared at him with eyes that belonged in an older, rougher face than the young, smooth one in which they sat. They were a lot like his father's had been years ago, Harry reflected. Hard, solid, unmovable.
Callie needs to know if you're brave enough to do what must be done. Are you?
The world spun inside Harry's head. He held up his hands.
I haven't been able to talk to Dr. Lilly alone.
Not that. Can you do it?
Callie wants me dead. Why?
I don't know. I have no fucking idea what the hell any of this is about, and neither does Callie. You have to know that, Lieutenant. All she wants is peace for her people. How in the world my old man figures into that is beyond me. And how the hell do you know Callie?
I don't. Major Levine was her primary contact here.
Both Seldons gaped at her. The woman's posture shifted slightly, and her grip on the pistol seemed to relax.
They went to high school together in Detroit. Levine joined the Army and got stationed at Fort Hood, and they stayed in touch, even after the reclamation. His friendship meant a lot to me and to our community.
Which community?
Legally, we can serve openly in the Army, but this is still Texas. Having an advocate at the top was extremely valuable.
I'm sorry for your loss.
He put his ass on the line for me more than once. Now I have no way to repay him except to honor his wishes. And he told me that if something happened to him, I was supposed to make sure your mission was completed.
And what did he say my mission was?
We can't discuss that.
She raised her head to indicate the microphones embedded all over the lab. that wouldn't be checked until hours later, Harry thought.
We have to discuss it. Things have changed. If what Callie told me is true, Barrett may know about it too. He could be trying to exploit it for the disciples, or even for Washington. This could be a complete setup.
Which is why I need to know. Are you prepared to do what must be done if necessary?
Harry backed off and sat down again next to his father. His gaze stayed locked with Graham's. A silence descended upon the three of them. The lieutenant's eyes bored holes into Harry's skull, probing for weakness, doubt, anything malleable and soft. Harry mustered up every cruel memory he could find, pushing his maimed childhood into the spotlights at the forefront of his consciousness. He remembered the hate, and his mind chewed on it bitterly. It was still there, and as it turned out, not very difficult to locate.
Yes, I am.
After a long moment, Lieutenant Graham cocked her head slightly and holstered her pistol. She stole a glance back towards the kitchen.
Give me 5 minutes.
Harry watched her go, and then allowed himself to face his battered, exhausted father. Something seemed to have given way inside Lars Selden. The inner struts that had held his face in perpetual alertness his entire life fell inward, allowing the skin to sag. His cheeks sank. He looked old, Harry thought. Older even than he actually was. The sharp, cruel angles of his brow melted into mere wrinkles. When at last he turned his eyes to face his son, Harry barely recognized him.
Harry, I'm sorry.
It was as if the floor had fallen out from under him. Harry floated in a cloud of disbelief, somewhere between heaven and hell. He blinked to make sure the man in front of him was indeed his father.
He deserved better. So did your mother. I am exactly the man that you know I am, and I deserve nothing. I am a machine that does only one thing well. Without that, I'm nothing.
This last was accompanied by a perceptible raise of one eyebrow. It came to Harry at last. The old man wanted his son to kill him. Something about knowing that it could really happen had erased everything else. More than defeating the Vorn or the Wireds, more than anything in the world, he wanted to die.
Dad, this isn't about revenge.
Doesn't matter. Not to me. I've been fighting my whole life. Where there were no enemies in sight, I made them. Out of my family, friends, strangers, even out of thin air.
Harry regarded his father's slackened form. It lay useless, like a hammer without a nail. Harry wanted to say things. He wanted to tell his father that he was trying to help him. But it wasn't true, not really. He hadn't wanted any of this. He was only in here because Nina didn't know what it was like to have a real father. She believed in the idea of fatherhood, the one in all the old shows. She had no idea that a dad could be selfish, cruel, evil. But Harry saw no evil as he cast his eyes over his broken father. He saw fate, helplessness, pain without explanation. He saw a human being damned from birth. And if Harry ever hoped to be anything greater than this shell of a man before him, he would grant his dad the peace that the old man would never receive, so long as he drew breath. Lars saw it in Harry's eyes. He nodded in silent agreement. And yet, he had more to say.
Well, they'll come for her. It isn't fair. None of this is. But they will.
Harry knew who he meant, and what he meant. Lars saw that in his eyes, too.
Are you prepared to do what needs to be done? For her?
Every fiber of Harry's heart ached at the thought.
They don't know.
They will. And the moment they see what I've seen, all of them, they'll do anything to get her. Will you let that happen?
Harry's head spun. He pushed the thought away, even as it struck him like a viper. It held fast to his mind, ripping into his emotions. He winced, willing it to leave his body.
Do it now, son. Kill me before they see her. She'll have more time before they find another super seer.
If I do it now, they'll lock me up. I can't watch out for her then.
Then kill her first before me.
I'll still get locked up or shot. Not that you care.
This is bigger than us. This is for the survival of everything your grandparents fought for. Your grandpa gave his life for freedom.
He gave his life for Grandma.
He never knew either of his grandparents, but he knew that they stuck with each other through the hell of raising their sociopathic son and everything leading up to the secession.
He gave his life for you ungrateful fucker.
God damn it, Harry. You don't choose the mission chooses you.
And that is why I'm going to let you rot in this chair, so you can finally see someone make a choice.
They'll find her, Harry. You can't make it stop.
Lars' words bounced off of Harry's back as he stalked out of the exam room. He was not going to be held hostage by forces beyond his control. 28 years of being his father's son had taught him where that path led. If the worst came, he would face it, even if it killed him. But he would not acknowledge its power over him. There were worse fates than death. As his hand gripped the door handle leading to the observation room, a memory hit him squarely in the head. Quickly, he turned towards the kitchen, to find that Dr. Vinson was no longer inside. Behind the glass sat Dr. Lilly, alongside the tense profile of Lieutenant Graham, her eyes shooting lasers into Harry's. Releasing the doorknob, still ignoring his ranting father, Harry stomped towards the kitchen. He and his high talk about choice were about to have words with each other. He opened and closed the kitchen door so loudly that Dr. Lily's head snapped around in startled surprise. Graham remained calm. Unnervingly so, Harry thought, as he watched her rise and walk casually towards the guest quarters, leaving the two men alone.
Doctor, I have a message from Callie Savine.
Go on.
An overwhelming majority of her people want to reverse the rewiring process and be reintegrated into wired society.
Yes, I know. I read the news feeds.
She also believes that you can trigger the process remotely.
By what means?
Her people have gathered enough wires for the entire population of Free Detroit. They believe if these are attached, you can send a signal through the net that will reverse their conversion.
I hate to tell you this, Harry, but she's mistaken. The manipulation of neural pathways must be done in a laboratory setting, administered by a trained physician.
She said that you built in a back door that can reverse the process.
Did she now?
Doctor, she was in tears. Callie Savine was crying. She said her republic was going to burn from the inside out if she didn't offer them a path to the outside. The VEF are strong there, and the desperation is even stronger. I saw it myself. You are their only hope.
You think the United States wants the human waste of Free Detroit back in its veins? Savine's subjects have nothing the corps want, even if I did use the...
They both noticed the slip at the same time. Lily gripped the table and leaned into Harry's face.
I see why they sent you now. So harmless, but just smart enough.
Nobody sent me. I only got dragged into this because that crazy old bastard wanted to teach me a lesson.
Which you seem to have learned. You won't win this. If you had any idea what you were asking for, you would run away screaming.
Don't think that hasn't occurred to me. But I made Callie a promise. So now it's up to you. Will you let Free Detroit burn itself alive?
You have no concept of what a stupid question that is. As if I get to pick and choose between victory or defeat. Let me tell you what lesson I've learned, young Harry Selden. Today's victory contains the seeds of tomorrow's defeat.
And vice versa. I've read some history, too.
History is over. The diaspora is the last memory of mankind as it was. The wire has frozen society in its place, eking out their days until the last resource is blindly harvested and burned. Humanity will consume and amuse itself to death.
The corps can't be that stupid. They have a vested interest in their own continued survival.
A corporation does not breathe, Harry. It does not eat, nor plant, nor reap. It controls. It is made of humans, but the humans are enthralled to it, every bit as much as their subjects are slaves to the wire. And who decides what goes down the wire?
The corporations.
Algorithms. The entire system is automated. It gets tweaked here and there by some executive or another, but only based on data generated by the system. The wired world is trapped in a loop from which it will never escape.
But the people inside the corps
can't do a damn thing about it. You know what happens to corp execs who question the system? Of course you don't, because they get fired. The system exists because the system must exist. The logic stops there.
You're not answering my question.
No, I'm not.
So your logic is the same as theirs. The secret is kept because the secret must be kept.
Don't fucking try to wade out into this water, Harry. Not unless you've watched your most beautiful dream turn into reality and then look on in horror as it opens its jaws and destroys everyone and everything you ever cared about.
You want me to feel sorry for you? Go sleep in one of the goddamned hovels all around Callie's Republic. Tell those people that your fear and loathing is more important than their suffering.
My fear and loathing caused their suffering. I created it, but not alone. And now 2 of the people who helped me develop it are trying to gain more leverage over the beast. You think they're going to do something good with that? You honestly believe James Barrett and Washington's rewiring guru have any intentions for this information beyond more control and slavery?
No.
The unexpected concession broke off the beginning of Lilly's next rant. He looked down at Harry with a mixture of confusion and pity. He sat down again.
Harry, you may not believe this, but I respect what you're trying to do.
He'd slipped into the paternal tone that Harry remembered from history class videos. It was jarring, hearing that voice come from the mouth of this tortured, confused old man.
I believed we could win, or I never would have done what I did. What we did. All of us believed we could make the world a better place. Even Barrett and Neidhart. But if you ask 3 different people what improves the society, you may not get the same answers. Multiply that example by 100-fold and you can see why we're now in the middle of this chaotic mess. Organizing utopians is like herding lemmings.
But we still have to do something.
Yes, and because this is science, we have to do it methodically. Mind first, heart second.
Do you believe Dr. Barrett will be approaching it that way?
No, but I need to find out what he thinks he knows. And just between you and I, there's not a single thing in this world more likely to throw him off script than the presence of Gabriella Neidhart. How is she, by the way?
Extremely distracting.
Always was.
That must have been quite something. You and her.
File that in your understatement folder. How about this? We find out what we're dealing with, and then we see what we can do for Free Detroit.
Harry nodded reluctantly. It was the best thing he was going to get under the circumstances. He stood and walked back through the exam room, where his father lay passed out in the chair. Harry frowned, craning his neck to ensure the old man was still breathing. Thus assured, he found that he himself was also completely exhausted. Stepping past the knob-twiddling Dr. Dalal, Harry opened the door into the adjoining room. Nina's body lay curled up on the couch, her eyes closed, lost to unconsciousness. Pulling up a chair, he watched her chest rise and fall. He wondered what dreams she was having, if they were better than reality, if he even knew what reality was anymore. For now, he would keep the outside world separate from the 2 of them. Moving his chair against the door, he leaned back and nodded off.
You've been listening to the Naive Theater of the Air performance of Rewired, featuring Trista Morris as Nina, Levi Ray as Harry, Reid Perry as Lars, Monna as Dr. Romana Vinson, Laura Hickman as the Vorn Queen, Keegan McInroe as Colonel Levi Haley, Ed Rogers as Dr. Waylon Lilly, Aidan Wright as Dr. Arshad Dalal, Jordan Anderson as Young Harry, and Hilary Tips as Lieutenant Stacy Graham. Written and narrated by Matthew Broyles. Theme music by Paul Shapira. I'm Little Jack Melody. Tune in next time for episode 24, The Queen.